How to Analyze People: The Truth About Mind Reading and Intuition. Written by Aries Helen. Narrated by Dean Collins. Chapter 1. Is there a millennial personality type? The definition of the millennial continues to get more interest from politics, pop culture, corporations, and also scholastic scientists and clinicians. It can reasonably be claimed that there are some crucial specifying millennial psychological or socio-cultural phenomena, including reality television voyeurism, obsessive startup ideation, and the on-demand living style craving. Do these cultural patterns have implications for the psychology of a generation? From the perspective of pop psychology, millennials have a unique identifiable character profile that has ramifications for employers, marketers, political leaders, and civilization at large. From the perspective of academic psychology, it is an empirical question that necessarily starts with a functional definition. The existence of several descriptions of millennials has been explained by news sources over the past year, though seldom. For example, the issue was the subject of a short roundtable conversation on the television show Morning Joe recently. That being said, this definitional problem has mostly gone disregarded, suggesting there's some intuitive, universally understood, yet unarticulated meaning. Since the term millennial describes an age-based demographic, an operational meaning requires an age range. Lacking any empirical or scholarly sources, I count on personal conversations and news reports in asserting that it has varied from 18 to 34 and a lot more broadly from 18 to 40. Within a subfield of psychology, particularly psychodynamic circles, there's a long-standing view of adolescence as being an extended psychological subjective state instead of a naturally defined discrete stage. In this context, individuals from 18 to 40 years old can validly be conceived as a meaningful group to be defined, described, labeled, and explained in connection to a common teen personality. Consider Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. A. Identity versus identity diffusion. B. Intimacy versus seclusion. And C. Generativity versus stagnation, all of which seem intuitively appropriate to the putative millennial character construct. Though empirically minded psychologists from all schools of thought should highlight more objective criteria. Because of that, for the purpose of clarity, parsimony, and the purpose of this book, let millennials be described as individuals in the 18 to 35 years age range. This meaning should be enhanced based on empirical proof as it emerges. To reach a valid and reliable operational definition, in theory, pertinent distinguishing variables from other age-based demographic constructs, for example, Generation X, Generation Y, baby boomers, etc., really need to be identified and tested. Moving past definitional concerns, the psychology of millennials should be clarified by empirical and medical proof. How can scientific and character psychologists answer questions about the existence of a valid millennial personality construct? Clinicians can observe typical medical concerns that are faced by millennials. Academic research can be examined for psychometric, neurobiological, and behavioral information that defines individuals varying from 18 to 35 years of age, and in contrast to other age or time periods. Chapter 2. Communication Success with Different Personality Types. The four personality types are the helpful nurturers, the creative idealists, the cerebral realists, and the strategic directors. Many of us have a dominant character type, with a couple of secondary types. These characteristics can change and progress over time. Each of the 4 personality types also has a greater and a lower maturity version. While the higher maturity version of each type normally has success in life, both personally and expertly, the lower maturity version usually struggles with particular issues. Here are some of the most dominant characteristics of each type. The helpful nurturers have the tendency to be nice, supportive, sensitive, and friendly. The creative idealists tend to be energetic, inspiring, persuasive, and fun. The cerebral realists have a tendency to be detail-oriented, job-driven, analytical, and matter-of-fact. The strategic directors tend to be powerful, achievement-conscious, control-oriented, and productive. Below is a description of the helpful nurturer personality type. Common professions, people-oriented and service professions like nursing, counseling, social work, K-6 education, executive assistant, and customer service. Qualities: friendly, value social relationships, subjective decision-making, conduct typically based on values and intuition, emotion-oriented, convincing, takes care of others, often embrace encouraging roles, romantic introvert. Obstacles: personal feelings can get in the way of neutrality, can be too passive, can't say no, dispute avoidant, look after self last, sacrifice for others at expense of oneself. Relationship with other types: idealist positive, admire idealists, want energy to rub off, want to become part of the fun. Idealist negative, overwhelmed by high energy of idealist. Realist positive, glad capable realist can handle details of task. Realist negative, think of realist as cerebral, cold and impersonal, lacking human sensitivity and consideration. Director positive, feel supported by people individual director. Director negative, find director frightening and prideful. In summary, for a nurturer, a day without a smile, kind words, and friendliness from others is a lot like a flower without air, sunshine, and water. The flower will wilt, just as the nurturer's heart will grieve. Love and appreciate a nurturer, and the nurturer will love and appreciate you back tenfold. It is essential to take note of the fact that this material is for reference only. There has always been a danger with personality sorters of putting people in boxes. Even when a person clearly matches one personality type, not every little thing written about that type may match the individual. We're far too complex to fit nicely into broad categories. Chapter 3: Mind Reading. Humans can't literally read the minds of other people, but they can create psychological models in order to successfully intuit individuals' ideas and feelings. This is referred to as compassionate accuracy, and it includes reading cues telegraphed by the words, feelings, and nonverbal communication of another individual. Many people have the ability to read others' emotions and thoughts to some degree, but the ones on the autism spectrum, or individuals affected with psychotic conditions, could struggle to determine the emotions or social cues of others. Often, knowing our own mind and motivations is challenging enough, not to mention the minds of complete strangers and even loved ones, friends, or partners. In relationships, lots of people make the critical mental mistake of overstating a partner or family member's capability to read their own ideas, assuming that anyone who knows them well must also know what they think or feel, even if they haven't said it out loud. How people see through each other. In sci-fi stories, mind reading is regularly used for nefarious purposes. In the real life, having a clear sense of what others think and feel helps us keep from disputes and miscommunication and strengthen personal relationships. When attempting to read a person's mind, or more accurately, their state of mind, body language, tone, and choice of words are generally the best spots to begin. Another crucial element is empathy. Having the ability to put oneself in somebody else's shoes can provide essential insights into their point of view and make understanding their thoughts, feelings, and actions that much easier. Can people really read one another's minds? Research implies that our discernment of other people's emotions and trustworthiness could manifest in our body's responses to them at least as strongly as in our psychological evaluations of their speech. Trusting a person's gut, then, by being mindful of our body's responses to someone else, can help us make more precise judgments about others. What emotional signals do we send out to others? When trying to read other individuals, we tend to look to their faces. Research shows that while the faces of happy people take on a V shape with eyebrows and mouths showed up, upset people's faces form more of an X, with eyebrows and mouths turned downward. Being aware of this tendency in others and ourselves can enhance communication and understanding. How well do romantic partners read each other? Romantic partners are very little better at reading each other's emotions than they are at reading anyone else's. By some estimates, even partners might only assess one another accurately about a third of the time. Partners could struggle to judge one another objectively just because of sentiment override, in which one's own feelings about a relationship impact their analysis of a partner's feelings. Do individuals from different cultures read people differently? As kids, people raised in different societies learn to adopt local standards for the display and expression of feelings. In spots such as Japan, for example, people may stress masking feelings when others are present. People also read others in a different way based on their particular cultural accents. For example, Americans rate expressions of joy, sadness, and surprise more intensely than others do. Improving your people reading abilities. Even the most socially skilled people regularly misread other people's feelings because of their own biases, cultural propensities, or situational elements, like not realizing a person who appears to have been sobbing may only have seasonal allergies. A greater knowledge of how others show their feelings, and, equally importantly, how our minds and bodies respond to the feelings of others, can help improve people reading skills. When is it hard to read other individuals' minds? People have also evolved ways to keep feelings and intentions opaque, and, with practice and intent, can successfully misguide others. Those who are experiencing grief or depression, for example, could put effort into concealing those feelings to keep from feeling as if they are burdening others or to keep from others' advice. How can you get much better at reading people? It has long been really believed that individuals' body language provides a way that people can have tells that could tip observant others off to their true intentions. Reading others can become more effective, research shows, when we purposely focus on such clues. That is an example. Facial features like the eyes and the mouth may offer a great deal of info, but if we are taking a look at the whole individual, we might miss seeing what their faces need to tell us. Can you keep nonverbal communication from giving you away? The face is the main medium for conveying feelings, but overall body language also plays a vital role. Often, even when we aim to keep our facial expression neutral, our overall nonverbal communication still gives us away. To avoid revealing way too much in social or professional situations, it is essential to consider both facial and body hints. When mind reading is a difficulty. Some psychiatric and behavioral conditions, like autism and ADHD, make reading the mind and feelings of others a challenge. While the ones with autism and ADHD do not routinely lack empathy, they might struggle to detect subtle hints, or could react impulsively without putting in the time to assess somebody's words or tone. These problems likely have roots in multiple areas of the brain. Some research has pointed to atypical activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, an area of the brain which plays a role in emotion, ethical choices, and social evaluation. Who struggles to read other individuals? Along with conditions like autism, research into compassionate accuracy has focused on the socially restless, who can have a problem with reading feelings simply because they find social interactions unforeseeable or confusing. However, studies have also discovered that there appear to be two kinds of socially anxious people. Some struggle with reading others, while a smaller-sized number actually stand out at mind reading, to the extent that it results in an increased awareness of others and a heightened sensitivity to being examined themselves. How can people with autism learn to read other individuals' feelings? Behavior therapy can help people coping with autism, ADHD, and other developing conditions learn to better recognize typical social cues that, when unnoticed, make it challenging to read other people's thoughts and react properly. Chapter 4. Everyday Mind Reading. Although there is no research proof to support mind reading via extrasensory perception, or ESP, there are individuals who are exceptionally skilled at reading others' nonverbal communication and making informed guesses about what they're thinking or feeling. Psychologist William Ikes calls it everyday mind reading, and there is evidence that we can develop our affective skills and end up being better at reading other people's feelings and thoughts. Here's how. Nonverbal decoding skill. Much of our ability to utilize others' emotions and feelings is through individual distinctions in reading others' nonverbal psychological expressions, specifically through facial expressions and intonation. To give you a sense of what a competent nonverbal decoder can do, watch a professional mind reader or mentalist at work on stage. The mentalist appears to have some sort of ESP, but is actually reading the nonverbal hints of audience members. The mind reader says, "A person here has just recently experienced a loss of a family member," and after that tries to find subtle reactions. Zeroing in on the individual who reacts, the mentalist probes around and watches for responses. It is not ESP. It's highly developed nonverbal decoding skill. The way to improve your ability to decode nonverbal cues is through systematic practice. Here is a guide for improving nonverbal decoding ability. Consider the context. It is not enough to be a great decoder of nonverbal hints. To truly be an everyday mind reader, you need to consider the context. The exact same nonverbal behaviors in different contexts mean different things. Imagine a wife and partner in a group discussion. You notice the spouse carefully squeezes her husband's hand. If it takes place throughout a lull in a conversation, it very likely signifies love. If it occurs after someone else had said something provocative, it might mean focus or remember what I told you. If it happens after the husband has said something, it may mean keep quiet. Context matters. Deceptiveness detection techniques. One might be inspired to become a daily mind reader to tell if others are lying or telling the truth. I'm sorry to tell you that research shows that we're just not very good at detecting deception. There are some uncommon people, though, who have exceptional ability to discover lies. Psychologists Paul Ekman and Maureen O'Sullivan labeled these people wizards of lie detection. How do they do it? The wizards look for inconsistencies in nonverbal conduct, or between what a person is saying and how they're saying it. They also analyze the context. Importantly, they don't fall victim to psychological shortcuts when it comes to lie detection, such as believing that a phony won't make eye contact, or will look in a specific direction when lying. Research actually shows that phonies engage in more eye contact than truth tellers. The smart phonies know all about the mental shortcuts people are susceptible to. So, how do you become a better everyday mind reader? 1. Get inspired. It is difficult to be a very good nonverbal decoder, so you need to have the devotion to do it. 2. Practice. Reading nonverbal communication and contextual hints need a good deal of practice. Importantly, you really need to practice in a way that allows you to evaluate your precision. Simply put, if you do not know the truth, you can't learn how to end up being more precise. 3. Do not take psychological faster ways. Don't presume that a specific nonverbal hint always means the exact same thing. Don't fall victim to stereotypes about people and their body language. An example could be this. Several research studies suggest that deceptiveness is better found by focusing on the liar's words rather than their body language. To put it simply, is the lie plausible? Are the verbal and nonverbal cues consistent? Chapter 5. The Truth About Intuition. In 1997, IBM's Deep Blue supercomputer beat the world's best chess player, Garry Kasparov. Instantly, some people noted that we were still superior at the age-old Chinese game of Go. Go, they reasoned, would remain out of robots' grab for the foreseeable future. Its plurality of possible moves and the nuances in assessing even who's winning put it further out of the world of rote combinatorics and into the orbit of instinct, allegedly humanity's specialty. It may be 100 years before a computer beats humans at Go, a Princeton astrophysicist told the New York Times right after the Kasparov match. Perhaps even longer. If you follow the news, you know it took till 2016. What does the success of DeepMind's AlphaGo against the best meat-based players say about instinct, human or otherwise? On one hand, it tears down some highfalutin claims about this special sense, exposing it to be, as some psychologists have long held, absolutely nothing more than pattern recognition. On the other hand, pattern recognition does not do full justice to the many patterns instinct recognizes. The majority of human conduct happens immediately, guided by genetics and routine instead of conscious deliberation. You could not really get by if you walked into a dining establishment and you needed to reconstruct from first concepts how to behave, says Valerie Thompson, a psychologist at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. Even for more complex problems, intuition drives choices, says Gerd Geigerenzer, a psychologist at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development in Berlin. In working with magnets at the biggest German companies, he finds that they go through all the information they have, and they're buried under information, and at the end, the information doesn't tell them what they should do. Instinct, he says, is a kind of unconscious intelligence that is as needed as conscious intelligence. Despite intuition's universality, we have many mistaken intuitions about instinct. Here we will consider 8 aspects of unconscious processing, including its application to creative skill, morality, and social interaction, taking a look at what it succeeds, where it fails, who uses it, when we trust it, and how to improve it. Building Deep Blue and AlphaGo required a lot of hard, deliberate thought, but it also required loads of human intuition or instinct and insight. The fact that we hacked together devices to beat us in a number of small corners of our own game shows, if absolutely nothing else, shows that we can hack our own instincts too. 1. Instinct is highly efficient, if you don't consider it excessive. A body of research reveals that intuition can be not only faster than reflection, but also more accurate. We're fairly good at judging people based upon impressions, thin pieces of experience varying from a glance of a photo to a 5-minute interaction, and deliberation can be not only extraneous, but invasive. In one study of the capability she called thin slicing, the late psychologist Nalini Ambady asked participants to watch quiet 10-second videos of professors and to rank the instructor's general effectiveness. Their ratings associated highly with students' end-of-semester ratings. Another set of individuals had to count backwards from 1,000 by nines as they watched the clips, inhabiting their conscious working memory. Their ratings were just as accurate, showing the intuitive nature of the social processing. Critically, another group was asked to spend a minute jotting down reasons for their judgment before giving the score. Accuracy dropped drastically. Ambady suspected that deliberation focused them on vivid but deceptive cues, such as certain gestures or utterances, instead of letting the complex interaction of subtle signals form a holistic impression. She found similar interference when individuals watched 15-second clips of sets of people and judged whether they were strangers, good friends, or dating partners. Other research shows that we are much better at finding deceptiveness and sexual preference from thin pieces when we count on intuition or instinct instead of reflection. It's just as though you are driving a standard transference, says Judith Hall, a psychologist at Northeastern University. And if you begin thinking about it too much, you can't remember what you are doing. However, if you go on automatic pilot, you're fine. Much of our social life is a lot like that. Thinking way too much can also hurt our ability to form an opinion. University students' rankings of strawberry jams and college courses aligned better with experts' opinions when the students weren't asked to analyze their reasoning. And people made car buying choices that were both objectively better and more personally pleasing when asked to focus on their feelings instead of on details, but only if the choice was complex, when they had a lot of information to process. Intuition's special powers are released only in certain scenarios. In one study, participants completed a battery of 8 jobs, including, but not limited to, 4 that tapped reflective thinking, critical rules, understanding, vocabulary, and 4 that tapped instinct or intuition and creative skill, creating new products or figures of speech. Then they ranked the degree to which they had used intuition or instinct, their gut feeling, hunches, my heart. Use of their gut hurt their efficiency on the first 4 jobs, as expected, and helped them on the rest. Sometimes, the heart is smarter than the head. 2. We get too emotionally attached to instinctive beliefs. Once an intuition hits, we hold on to it despite the threats. Instinct can, for instance, lead to various kinds of cognitive and social predispositions, like the anchoring impact, where choices are swayed by the first piece of info tossed at us, and racial prejudice. Even in parts where the heart should rule, like passion, it can be clueless. In a classic research study, when guys on a bridge were halted by an attractive woman and asked to finish a questionnaire, they were way more likely to try to contact her afterward if it was a scary suspension bridge, misattributing psychological arousal to sexual attraction. Our dreams, the things we cannot really control, hold a powerful aura of truth we can't quite snuff out. People report they're more likely to change their travel prepares if they dreamed about a plane crash than if the federal government announced an actual travel caution. And test takers cannot shake the first instinct fallacy. 3 in 4 college students reported that when reevaluating an answer on an examination, their preliminary choice will usually turn out to be right. But when erase marks on actual exams were evaluated, the reverse held true. 2 times as many changed answers went from wrong to right as right to wrong. In general, says psychologist Sascha Topolinski of the University of Cologne in Germany, intuition or instinct is something psychological that makes you positive in an idea. You can't eliminate this feeling from me. I do not trust this vehicle seller. I can't tell you why, but I am confident I don't like him. Intuition about the accuracy of an intuition is a lot more fallible. When some people were asked to rank their confidence that their gut feelings had steered them masterfully on a test, self-confidence rankings had no relationship with real performance. Even when we acknowledge the irrationality of an intuition, we typically stick with it. Consider superstitious notions. I'm an atheist who knocks on wood while understanding it's hogwash. When an instinct captures attention and activates emotions, it might be specifically hard to shake, says Jane Risen, a psychologist at the University of Chicago. She calls preserving beliefs we know to be false giving in to intuition or instinct. Intuition may not be magic, but we're truly under its spell. 3. Intuition can be improved with practice. To have good intuitions in any domain needs a lot of practice, but not all domains are open to good intuitions. First of all, there should be regularities connecting events and outcomes. The domain must have high credibility. Gary Klein, a psychologist in Washington, D.C., speaking with the firm Macrocognition, has long checked out the role of knowledge in the intuition or instinct of experts like fire commanders, who can size up a burning building rapidly. Fires follow the laws of physics, says Klein. The international economy is significantly more chaotic, preventing predictability. As Geiger-Renzer notes, 5 years before the 2007 housing crisis, the president of the American Economic Association said, "Macroeconomics has prospered. Its central issue of depression avoidance has been resolved." Whether you should trust your feelings should hinge not on the strength of those emotions, we have poor intuitions about instincts, but on the structure of the domain you are operating in. Look external, not inward. Second, you need clear feedback to refine your instinctual decisions. A review of the literature shows that weather forecasters, test pilots, and chess masters had more reliable expertise than psychologists, admissions officers, and judges. Outcomes in the latter's areas are fuzzier and can play out long after you have made a decision. That goes for much of daily life also. You do not do a diary in an Excel file where you write, "Okay, on October 1st, I made this choice," or "I bought this product," and so on, Topolinski says. We lack the hard data about what we do. Good instincts in one domain don't guarantee good instincts in another. As Geiger-Renzer puts it, a soccer player who has great intuitions about scoring an objective might have bad intuitions about spending his money. So there cannot be a general test of instinct or intuition. Even within a domain, know-how can vary between different kinds of jobs. We can use concentrated thinking not only to train our instinctive expertise over time, but also to welcome or keep away from intuitions in the moment. Metaphors and sketches are outstanding tools to help us reframe problems or see solutions more plainly. Klein coaches people to look at premortems. When considering a strategy, imagine from a future vantage point that it failed and think of what went wrong. This thinking tool makes powerlessness real, instinctual things rather than abstract and ignorable hypotheses. Philosopher Daniel Dennett of Tufts University has coined the term instinct or intuition pumps for thought experiments meant to reframe issues, but he notes that they can be used for good or for evil. One should learn how easy it is to build bogus intuition or instinct pumps that will provoke fist-pounding intuitions that aren't worth your loyalty, Dennett says. But also, instinct pumps can help you out of imagination blockades. Caution is advised. The role of deliberation in honing impulses and understanding when to trust them reveals reflection's close cooperation with instinct in both its development and implementation. Our reflective deliberation scaffolds off our instinct or intuition, but it goes both ways, says psychologist Gordon Pennycook of the University of Regina in Canada. We also tend to use them in tandem. 4. Intuition is picking up. Insight is seeing. Intuition is much related to another I word, insight. Sometimes the two are conflated, which is easy to understand. Both relate to ideas emerging from subconscious procedures, offering assistance and hiding their tracks. But they are basically different. Insight is all about seeing, says Eugene Sadler Smith, a management scientist at Surrey Business School in England. You can articulate the resolution and you can clarify it to somebody else, whereas intuition or instinct is picking up. We can notice a solution to an issue, or we can notice a decision that we should take. It's a judgment. It's practically like a hypothesis. We do not know whether it's right or wrong till we act upon it. According to macrocognition's Gary Klein, intuition is how we use our experience to know how to act. Insight runs in the opposite direction. It is not just making use of what you know, it is changing what you know. To that end, we in some cases need to clear instinct or intuition out of the way to obtain the sudden solutions we call insight. Developments are usually counterproductive. One way to demonstrate the role of regular barriers is to look at magic tricks. Illusions resolve mental jujitsu, using our presumptions against us. To find out how a trick is done, one should relax certain mental constraints, a very good method for generating insights in general. In one research study, participants watched video clips of a dozen magic tricks, and half got a spoken clue directing their attention to an assumption. For instance, when the magician appeared to throw a coin from one hand to another before making it vanish, the clue was, transfer to other hand. Given such prods to counter their instinct about what they saw, their resolution rate went from 21% to 33%. Instinct's relationship with insight is complicated. It can at times show when an insight is possible. A typical laboratory test of insight is the Remote Associates Test, or RAT. Given 3 words, like cottage, Swiss, and cake, can you find a 4th that links them? In this case, cheese. A variation on this task shows people either a coherent or a random word triad and makes them guess rapidly whether it is solvable before asking them for a solution. Even in cases when people cannot summon the solution, they're better than chance at judging the triad's coherence. Scientists use creative intuition to choose which courses to follow toward potential discoveries. This is the idea of sensing the right direction, Sadler Smith says, like a radar that says, go down there, but not down there. Nobel laureates have discussed their use of hunches. Michael S. Brown, Medicine, 1985, has said, as we did our work, I think, we almost felt sometimes that there was practically a hand directing us. But we tend to have poor intuition or instinct about how close we are to an insight. In one study, individuals were given mathematics and reasoning issues, whose options needed either a main insight or mere grinding, and were asked to approximate their distance from the resolution every 15 seconds. Unlike for the non-insight issues, estimates for insight problems stayed fairly flat until the final aha. In a second research study, individuals' forecast of whether they'd be able to solve insight problems had no connection with the truth, in contrast to routine algebra issues. Topolinsky notes the olden attempt to perform a mathematical accomplishment called squaring the circle before it was proven impossible in 1882. There were many blind tracks that people followed for millennia, he says. Similarly, Einstein produced his theories of relativity, then for the rest of his life he's creating a possible theory of every little thing. Such a concept might be out there, but for his capabilities and his time, this was an incorrect instinct or intuition. 5. Tension favors intuition. Unhappiness does not. Deliberation is high-end. In dire circumstances, say, while being gone after by a bear, you do not have the time to weigh all your alternatives. You follow your first impulse. Run, probably. Anxiety stimulated in any circumstance similarly pushes you toward quick and penny-wise reflexes. If you're really in danger, that can be convenient. Otherwise, reflection could be better. One research study looked at the effects of tension on decision-making by connecting electrodes to participants' hands and randomly zapping them. Meanwhile, the poor souls had to complete analogies by flipping through answers one at a time. Butter is to margarine as sugar is to beets, saccharin, honey, lemon, candy, chocolate. Compared to participants who didn't get shocks, they were more likely to get on an answer without even seeing all of the alternatives, and as a result, got more wrong. Tension's impacts on the brain are mediated in part by the release of the hormone agent cortisol. In one experiment, scientists gave individuals a cortisol-increasing drug, or a placebo, then had them do something called the cognitive reflection test, or CRT. The CRT includes 3 questions, each with an intuitive but wrong answer. This could be, a bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat cost $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? You want to say 10 cents. But a fast calculation reveals the ball is 5 cents and the bat is $1.05. Many people, even students at elite colleges, failed to get all 3 problems right. But cortisol lowered right answers even further. Even as tension triggers heuristic thinking, routines, and shortcuts, it deteriorates more sophisticated intuitive processing. Remember the remote associates test, cottage Swiss cake? One research study learned that increased anxiety in individuals by demonstrating them hair-raising images scrambled their instincts about whether a linking word existed. The macabre images may have affected this performance step, called an intuition index, in part by reducing individuals' mood. Sadness tends to make people think analytically. We're sad when something's wrong, which could be time for concentrated problem solving. 6. Some people are more instinctive than others. Some researchers actually believe there are individual differences in broad instinctive capability. A current research study found 2 clusters of intuitive skill. One is related to insight, such as developing a new metaphor, which is connected to intelligence. The other, related to implied learning, or learning complex info without knowing what you've learned, say picking up a new language, isn't highly linked to intelligence. Perhaps more consequential for conduct than general instinctive capability is the thinking style, the degree to which you rely on intuition or instinct and reflection in the first place. A common denominator in research is the faith in instinct, or FI scale, in which people rate contract with statements like, "I believe in trusting my hunches." FI and similar steps have been linked with several positive attributes. People with high FI get high instinct index scores, as long as they're in a positive state of mind, a state that brings intuition or instinct out to play. Another scale, with items like, "I usually make decisions that feel right to me," associated with better recognition of social norms as measured by how precisely people estimated their peers' approval of behaviors like stealing and fighting. And another correlated with greater creativeness on some tasks, such as drawing and thinking about uses for a cardboard box. But people who put faith in instinct or intuition also pay a rate. They perform worse on tasks requiring logic. They report having experienced more problems arising from poor decisions, varying from missing a flight to getting divorced. They report greater magic thinking, belief in astrology, ghosts, luck, God, and so on. And in one study, they were more likely to stereotype based on gender, but only in a positive state of mind. Topolinsky suggests that people may want to seek professions that match their thinking style. An accounting professional won't get as far relying on her gut as would, say, a therapist. And in any profession, if you know you put great faith in feelings, you may include extra reflection on jobs where breeze decisions can get you into trouble, like getting to the airport. 7. Morality intuitions are quickly swayed. Some of our deepest held beliefs involve morality, how we feel people should behave towards one another. And though they could appear as rock solid as fact, "Thou shalt not kill," they are just as directed by intuition or instinct as anything else. We can reason about lots of them, but only to a point. For many, especially on controversial or subtle issues like abortion, it boils down to intuition or instinct. It just feels wrong or right. Ethical institutions are inevitable and also valuable, says psychologist Matthew Feinberg of the Rotman School of Management in Toronto. They drive compassion and also social justice movements. But ethical instincts are also at the heart of many, many issues in society. Impassioned instinct can derail rational discussion, as opponents are identified as evil. Many discoveries highlight the unconscious processing built into moral judgment. Often, we base opinions on things we'd never ever factor into an intentional decision. In one research study, individuals' approval of sex between cousins depended on whether somebody had secretly deployed fart spray nearby. Visceral repulsion resulted in moral repulsion. In another study, individuals were asked whether it was okay to push a pretty large man off a footbridge to block a trolley from eliminating 5 others. If they just watched a clip from Saturday Night Live versus a documentary, their mood was more positive, and they were 4 times as likely to authorize. That doesn't sound like reflection. Thou shalt not kill, unless you've heard a great joke lately. Naturally, morality is based upon more than short-lived incidental cues. We also have much deeper values like fairness and loyalty, each an abstraction formed from a lifetime of experience. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt of New York City University has defined 5 distinct ethical foundations that direct our behavior: fairness, commitment, authority, purity, and avoiding harm. Studies suggest that political liberals prioritize fairness and harm avoidance. Conservatives favor loyalty, authority, and purity. And Feinberg has found out that we can form people's ethical intuitions by catering messages to their preferred values. When he framed an argument for universal health care concerning pureness, less diseased Americans, versus fairness, health care for all, conservatives uttered more support for Obamacare. When he laid out an argument for army spending in regard to fairness, fighting inequality, versus authority, American supremacy, liberals expressed more support. Also, he swayed conservatives to support same-sex marriage through commitment, patriotic couples, and environmentalism through purity, a tidy planet. He also used ethical reframing to lower conservative support for Donald Trump, he disloyally evaded the draft, and liberal support for Hillary Clinton, she unfairly favors Wall Street. Examples, metaphors, images, and stories can give shape to our own and other people's instincts, not only in politics, but in all realms of life, science, relationships, education. We acquire new models of the world and thought, mindful and not, fills them in. When it comes to messages meant to elicit instinct, we see a lot of that on the internet these days, says the University of Saskatchewan's Thompson. Memes. That's precisely what they are. One could fairly call memes the fart spray of the web. 8. You can check out people by reading what they write online. Humans have strong intuitions about other individuals. This is just because character judgment has such dire effects, and because we have so much experience with it over our lifetimes and over evolution. What happens when people reading goes on the internet? And when it's limited to the reading of what others write? Progressively, we should evaluate one another by means of bits of text rather than, for example, darting eyes or kind smiles. But that does not keep back our breeze judgments. Typically, when asked to rate a writer's personality types based upon emails, personal essays, streams of consciousness, mock diary entries, mock blog posts, Twitter feeds, and dating ads, readers agree with each other more than chance would enable, indicating that there are hints in written reports that dependably trigger our intuitions. Which cues do we use? In dating profiles, studies show swear words suggest high neuroticism and low conscientiousness and agreeableness. Angry words suggest the exact same in tweets. In personal essays, exaggeration suggests extroversion and openness to experience. Past tense suggests depression in post, and cognitive words like no suggested in diaries. Certainly, deliberation plays a role in judgments, but I question anybody as counting past tense verbs. Our judgments about qualities from writing samples are also regularly more accurate than chance would allow, and some people are better than others at reading between the lines. One research study by Hall of Northeastern University found that the best judges were female, agreeable, diligent, mentally steady, thoughtful, interested in other people's lives, and big readers, especially of fiction. Judgments of personality can come from the thinnest of pieces, even just an email address. What's thinner than an email address? Punctuation. A study learned that angry and happy-seeming emails have many exclamation points and few enigma, and feminine-seeming emails have both. Other work found out that smileys in official emails do not make the author appear warm, but do make her or him appear unskilled. In the meantime, adding a smiley with a nose to a dating profile will win more replies, while adding a noseless smiley will get you less. RRB. To think, your future could depend on an emoji. Neither head nor heart can make it through by itself, and negotiating their symbiosis is a difficulty that is much harder than mastering chess or Go. It's not about whether instinct or analysis is best, Sadler Smith tells supervisors. The real skill in decision-making, problem-solving, creativity, whatever, is mixing those two things together. And in a way, that's sort of a lifetime project, isn't it? Chapter 6. A simple technique to help you read people better. James, not his real name, was a chain smoker, so he needed to go outside the structure to have the long discussion I was expecting. I had reached out to James, a knowledgeable interrogator, because I was an intelligence officer interested in finding out more about deceptiveness detection. As we walked around a grassy area on the south side of the East Coast Center, I asked James whether he thought it was possible to tell whether a prisoner was lying. He took a deep drag on his unfiltered camel while he considered my question. "Well," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips, "sort of." My own breath looked a lot like cigarette smoke in the February early morning air as I asked, "Sort of?" More puffs off the camel, followed by a routine in which James dropped his half-smoked cigarette and ground it out under his heel while lighting another. While watching this, it struck me that I was questioning an interrogator who didn't really appreciate being interrogated, so atypically, I waited patiently for a response. "All of us, interrogators, have certain tells we keep an eye out for," James said, squinting at me through a cloud of smoke. "We look for, eye movements, way too much fidgeting, insufficient fidgeting, changes in intonation, inconsistencies in timelines, posture, yada yada. But I have come to doubt that stuff, at the very least when I am the one doing the questioning. What I like to do now is watch someone else put questions to a detainee. However, I don't watch the prisoner. I look at the officer asking the questions. How he responds to answers tells me more than how the detainee reacts to questions." I asked, "You mean the interrogator is a type of tuning fork that resonates with vibrations from a prisoner, and you search for vibrations of deception?" "More or less," he replied. "I cannot tell you exactly what it is that I am getting, but I've come to trust my understandings. The thing is, however, when I asked the officers whether they knew they were changing their behavior when they thought a man was lying, they took offense, because, they're not supposed to telegraph what they're thinking." James repeated his cigarette snuffing and lighting ritual. "The officers typically tell me that, when I saw them react to a detainee lying, they actually did think the guy was being incredibly elusive or misleading. They just didn't think their emotions revealed." With that, James tossed his camel and headed back to the warmth of the structure. The interrogation of the interrogator was over. Although James worked with lawbreakers, his tuning fork insight can help you do a better job of reading daily people by reading yourself. That's right. If you want to understand another person's nonverbal communication, start by zeroing in on your own nonverbal communication as you communicate with that person. Research on mirror neurons in the motor cortex of primates, along with electromyographic studies of subjects who are observing the conduct of others, suggests that minute contraction connected with unconscious mimicry consistently take place when we watch other individuals' conduct, including facial expressions, gestures, gait, and even control of things. It stands to reason, then, that we can get a better picture of another's emotions by paying closer attention to physical feelings in our own bodies. Concentrating on physical experiences can be a better way to know what we're truly feeling than straight inventorying our emotions, just because our social brains have evolved to reduce feelings about others, especially negative feelings. The bottom line is that your body can be a better tuning fork for finding out other tribes' feelings than your mind. The next time it is really essential to read another person, on a date, on a job interview, a deal, or a meeting with your boss, practice sensate awareness, also called mindfulness, to better concentrate on your body. The method is basic. Take several deep breaths, hold them for 30 seconds, then breathe out. Beginning with your feet, run a fictional scanner up your body, noticing the experiences in your feet, calves, thighs, abdominal area, arms, chest, throat, neck muscles, and face. These are what I call baseline feelings. Repeat the exercise several times until you think you can remember your baseline. This exercise is useful on many levels, one of which is to expose persistent tension in certain parts of your body. Now you are prepared to be a tuning fork. In circumstances where reading the other individual is very important, take a number of deep breaths and occasionally repeat the fictional scan of your body, searching for departures from your baseline. That takes some practice because we generally concentrate on others when we engage with them, but you'll marvel how quickly you can master it. I can tell you from personal experience that the strategy actually works. As a therapist dealing with violent men at a community psychological university hospital, I found scanning to be a reliable tool for picking up deeply buried hostilities that I otherwise would have missed, most likely because I didn't want my clients to be feeling hostile. And that's the crucial takeaway for reading others. Our bodies can tell us what's actually going on, not what we want to be going on. This has been How to Analyze People: The Truth About Mind Reading and Intuition. Written by Aries Helen. Narrated by Dean Collins. How to Analyze People: How to See Through Deception and Make Better Eye Contact. Written by Aries Helen. Narrated by Dean Collins. Chapter 1. The Top 3 Methods to Analyze Other People. A psychiatrist's true calling is actually to read people's emotions and thoughts, not just what they say, but who they are. Translating verbal and nonverbal hints, I want to see past their masks and into the real person. Logic alone won't tell you the entire story about anybody. You should give up to other crucial forms of information so that you can learn how to read the essential nonverbal instinctual hints that people produce. If this needs to get done, you should also want to surrender any prejudgments or emotional baggage, such as old resentments or ego clashes, that stop you from seeing someone plainly. The key is to remain objective and get information neutrally without distorting it. Whether you read your boss, colleague, or partner, to understand people accurately, you must surrender predispositions. Some walls should boil down. As brilliant as the intellect is, you have to be willing to let go of old, restricting ideas. Many people who read others well are trained to read the invisible. They've learned to utilize what I call their supersenses, to look further than where you generally put your attention to access life-changing intuitive insights. I welcome you to explore some of these different methods of reading people from my book, The Euphoria of Surrender. They all require surrendering pure reasoning in favor of also getting optional, nonlinear forms of input. 3 methods in the art of reading people. The first technique: observe body movement hints. Research has revealed that words account for only 7% of how we communicate, though our nonverbal communication, 55%, and voice tone, 30%, represent the rest. Here, the surrender to concentrate on is releasing trying too hard to read body language hints. Do not get overly intense or analytical. Stay relaxed and fluid. Be comfortable, kick back, and just observe. 1. Focus on appearance. When reading others' notification, are they wearing a power suit and well-shined shoes, dressed for success, indicating ambition? Denims and a t-shirt, suggesting convenience with being casual. A tight top with cleavage, a sexy choice. A pendant like a cross or Buddha, indicating spiritual values. 2. Notice posture. When reading individuals' posture, ask yourself, do they hold their head high, positive? Or do they walk indecisively or cringe, a sign of low self-confidence? Do they swagger with a puffed-out chest, a sign of a big ego? 3. Expect physical movements. Leaning and distance. Observe where people lean. Usually, we favor those we like, and from those we don't. Crossed arms and legs. This position suggests defensiveness, anger, or self-protection. When people cross their legs, they tend to point the toes of the leading leg towards the individual they're most at ease with. Hiding somebody's hands. When people place their hands in their laps, pockets, or put them behind their back, it suggests that they're hiding something. Lip biting or cuticle picking. When people bite or lick their lips, or chew their cuticles, they're trying to soothe themselves under pressure or in an uncomfortable situation. 4. Analyze facial expression. Emotions can become engraved on our faces. Deep frown lines suggest concern or overthinking. Crow's feet are the smile lines of delight. Pursed lips signal anger, contempt, or bitterness. A clenched jaw or teeth grinding are signs of stress. The second method. Listen to your instinct. You can tune into somebody beyond their nonverbal communication and words. Intuition is what your gut feels, not what your head says. It is nonverbal information you view through pictures and ahas, rather than reasoning. If you want to understand somebody, what counts the most is who the individual is, not their outer trappings. Intuition lets you see further than the obvious to expose a richer story. Checklist of instinctive hints. 1. Honor your suspicion. Listen to what your gut says, especially at the time of first conferences, a visceral response that occurs before you have a chance to think. It communicates whether you are at ease or not. Gut feelings happen quickly, a primal reaction. They're your internal truth meter, communicating if you can trust people. 2. Feel the goosebumps. Goosebumps are magnificent intuitive tingles that communicate that we resonate with people who move or inspire us or are saying something that strikes home. Goosebumps also happen when you experience déjà vu, a recognition that you've understood somebody before, though you have actually never met. 3. Pay close attention to flashes of insight. In conversations, you may get an aha about people who can be found in a flash. Stay alert, otherwise you might miss it. We tend to go on to the next idea so quickly, these critical insights are lost. 4. Look for instinctive empathy. Sometimes you can feel individuals' physical symptoms and feelings in your body, which is an extreme form of empathy. So, when reading people, notification. Does my back hurt when it didn't before? Am I depressed or upset after an uneventful meeting? To determine if this is empathy, get feedback. The third technique. Sense emotional energy. Emotions are a stunning expression of our energy, the vibe we emit. We register these with instinct. There are those that feel good to be around. They improve your state of mind and vitality. Others are draining. You naturally want to escape. This subtle energy can be felt inches or feet from the body, though it is unnoticeable. In Chinese medication, it's called qi, a vigor that's important to health. Strategies to check out emotional energy. 1. Sense people's presence. This is the general energy we produce, not always congruent with words or behavior. It's the emotional environment surrounding us, like a rain cloud or the sun. 2. Watch people's eyes. Our eyes send powerful energy. Just as the brain has an electromagnetic signal extending beyond the body, research studies show that the eyes project this as well. Take time to observe individuals' eyes. Also, you should identify, is there somebody in the home in their eyes, suggesting a capability for intimacy? Or do they appear to be guarded or hiding? 3. Notice the feel of a handshake, hug, and touch. We share psychological energy through physical contact, similar to an electrical present. Ask yourself, does a handshake or embrace feel warm, comfortable, confident? Or is it off-putting, so you want to withdraw? Are individuals' hands clammy, indicating anxiety? Or limp, suggesting being noncommittal and timid? 4. Listen for intonation and laugh. The tone and volume of our voice can tell much about our feelings. Sound frequencies create vibrations. When reading people, notice how their tone of voice affects you. Ask yourself, does their tone feel soothing? Or is it abrasive, snippy, or whiny? Chapter 2. How we read people's minds through their eyes. Which would you rather hang in your living room? A picture of an empty chair, or a picture of someone being in that chair? Our look is naturally drawn to other individuals, and even a portrait of an unidentified person would not be out of place over the mantel or behind the couch, yet a picture of an empty chair would be strange. We'd probably even invent some reason why there's no individual in the picture. Perhaps that is the chair the artist's mom always sat in, and he painted it empty to convey his deep feeling of loss at her passing away. At any rate, there is still an individual indicated, and we'd be hard-pushed to accept the painting as just the portrait of a chair. Why would you paint such a thing? We spend a lot of time looking at other people, particularly at their faces. We're also told to look others in the eye when we speak with them, and we could feel awkward when an individual we are talking to keeps looking away. Most research on eye gaze has measured individuals' eye movements as they connect with still pictures or moving videos of other individuals on a computer screen. In these jobs, individuals spend more of their time looking at people than they do inanimate objects such as chairs. Still, University of Waterloo psychologist Evan Risco and his co-workers believe that there's far more to the story of where we cast our look when we are out in the real world with other individuals. Society bombards us with conflicting guidelines. We're told to look other people in the eye, yet we are also told not to look. And whether we gaze or not might depend upon what we think we can get away with. In one experiment, participants were seated across from a stranger in a waiting room while experimenters secretly tracked their eye look. These people rarely looked at the stranger. Truth be told, they actually spent more time looking at an empty chair that had also been put in the room. Another group of participants watched a live video feed of a person sitting in a waiting room. This time, the results were reversed. Now the people spent most of their time gazing at the other person, and very little time taking a look at the empty chair. According to Risco and his associates, these results are because of what he calls civil negligence. Eye look is a signal of what we're taking note of, and thus what we're interested in. It is socially uncomfortable to inhabit a space with another individual and not engage in conversation. Yet striking up a discussion with a total stranger is challenging for many people, and we could deem it not worth the effort if it is not likely we'll ever see that individual again. So rather, we act like we haven't observed each other. Obviously, when we think the other individual does not know we're looking, we give our voyeuristic bent free rein. Even when we participate in face-to-face encounters, whether we gaze or look away depends on several aspects. When researchers asked participants to connect with another person through what they believed to be a two-way video feed, they tended to make more eye contact when that individual was thought to be socially inferior to them, and they looked away more when connecting with a perceived social exceptional. Having said that, when they believed that the other person could not see them, the results reversed again. That is, they looked more at the social remarkable and less at the social inferior. Social superiors naturally amass our interest, but we may feel ashamed to look an essential person in the eye. Thus, we gaze intently as the president addresses the country on TV. However, in an in-person meeting, we'd probably cast our gaze downward. Behavior like this is likely due to more than just social standards, since our primate cousins also use eye look to signal social status. Simply because it's so simple for others to presume what we're thinking from our eye gaze, we also participate in civil negligence if exposing our thoughts would cause us embarrassment. In a third study, participants were fitted with eye-tracking gadgets and asked to wait alone in a space until it was time for the experiment to start. An intriguing poster of a design in a swimwear hung on one wall. Individuals who had been told that the gadgets were already taping looked away from the poster. Individuals led to really believe that the gadgets were not yet recording, though, well, you can guess where they looked much of the time. We tend to look straight at an item we're addressing, since doing so casts its image into the center of our visual field, where we see things most clearly. Psychologists call this overt attention, because when we look at a thing, others around us know what we're taking note of. Yet we also have the ability to pay more attention to items outside the center of our visual field. Psychologists call this covert attention, simply because it appears that we're looking at one thing while truly taking notice of something else. There's some pretty advanced mind reading going on when we participate in covert attention. If I see you looking at that swimsuit model, I know what you're thinking. And if I look at her, I know that you will know what I'm thinking. Sure, I want to gawk at her, but I do not want you to think that I'm interested in that sort of thing. So I turn my look from her, only not too far, so she's still within my range of hidden attention. Chapter 3. Deception. Deceptiveness describes the act, big or small, cruel or kind, of motivating people to really believe info that is not true. Lying is a typical form of deception, stating something known to be false with the intent to trick. While most people are usually sincere, even those who subscribe to honesty engage in deceptiveness in some cases. Studies show that the typical person lies some number of times a day. Some of those lies are huge. I have never cheated on you. But more regularly, they're little white lies. That dress looks fine. Released to keep from uncomfortable situations or save somebody's feelings. Trust is the bedrock of social life at all levels, from romance and parenting to national government. Deceptiveness always weakens it. Because truth is so essential to the human business, which counts on a shared view of reality, the default presumption most people have is that others are honest in their interactions and negotiations. Most cultures have effective social sanctions against lying. The numerous forms of deception. There are sins of commission and sins of omission. Omitting information and concealing the truth are considered lies when they're finished with an intent to trick. Aside from statements that are incorrect, deceptiveness incorporates declarations that misrepresent or distort facts, and also the withholding of information. People can lie through straight-out declarations or by tactical silence. What types of lies do people tell? People could intentionally create false information or produce a story. However, most often, large development isn't the soul of lying. Rather, people trick by omitting info, denying the truth, or overemphasizing information. Or they might agree with others when in fact they do not, in order to maintain a relationship. But lies that are in one's own self-interest help phonies get what they want, make them look better, or spare them blame or humiliation. How do I lie to myself? Deceptiveness isn't always an outward-facing act. There are also the lies people tell themselves, for reasons ranging from maintenance of self-esteem to serious misconceptions beyond their control. While lying to oneself is generally perceived as damaging, some specialists say that certain sorts of self-deception, like believing one can accomplish a tough goal even if proof exists to the contrary, can have a positive influence on overall well-being. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting is a pernicious form of manipulation in which someone is deliberately told incorrect info with an intent to damage, specifically to weaken their sense of reality. Lies are used as weapons in an effort by one person to exert control over another. The strategy is commonly released by abusers, narcissists, cult leaders, and dictators. How are delusions different from lies? Deceptions are an extreme, pathological form of self-deception. They are false beliefs that contradict reality but which a person is convinced hold true, and might go to great lengths to convince others that they hold true. Deceptions are typically a symptom of impaired reality perception, common to mental conditions like mania and psychosis. How to find deception? Scientists have long looked for ways to definitively identify when someone is lying. They know that some people are better at lying than others. Their visual and verbal hints are in sync with what they're saying. But research studies consistently show that most people are terrible at discovering deceptiveness, performing no better than chance. There's evidence that many people have unreliable beliefs about signals of lying. For instance, that fidgeting is always a giveaway. How do I know when I am being lied to? Many professionals propose that phonies expose themselves in tells, significant and minor changes in nonverbal communication or facial expressions. However, observable signs of lying can be undependable. Researchers do find that some people lie more than others. Research studies show that children under 2 never lie, and that lying peaks in teenage years, when social relationships take on heightened significance. How do I know when I am lying to myself? Many people aren't knowledgeable about the ways they deceive themselves, but psychologists have identified many signals of self-deception. Outsized emotional reactions to present circumstances, conduct that runs out of step with who you claim or intend to be, can be indications that we believe things about ourselves that are false, or struggle to really believe things that are true. Is lack of eye contact always revealing? There is a long-standing belief that the eyes are a window to the truth, that liars are shifty and inadvertently indicate their deception by avoiding their look or completely keeping away from looking a conversation partner in the eye. However, science gives the lie to that belief. Actually, researchers have found out that people make more eye contact when lying than when telling the truth. What are body language signals of lying? Covering a neck with a hand, raising the inside edge of a foot, compressing the lips. All are signs of stress that has been connected to lying. There is a widespread belief that the body and face are always truthful and provide trusted clues to lying, often called tells, if you know what to search for. But experts now believe that there is no single behavior indicative of deception, although such so-called nonverbals should be seen as notifications to possibly concealed or suspicious information that require further probing. Can speech give clues to deception? Researchers find that language and speech can offer possible but not definitive clues to deceptiveness. In analyses of text messages, liars tend to rattle on more, present few proven facts, and appear less certain of the facts. In speech, overuse of little utterances like ah, you know, right, I mean, can be clues to the cognitive load associated with lying. Are lie detector tests trustworthy? One of the best-known techniques, the polygraph test, is based upon the idea that lying modifies regular psychophysiological patterns that can be spotted by sensitive equipment. While well known in crime dramas and movies, the test has long been controversial, without evidence that there are definitive fluctuations in physiology. Evidence suggests that those with certain psychiatric conditions, like antisocial personality disorder, can't be accurately gauged by polygraph or other common lie detection approaches. Why people engage in deceptiveness. According to one professional, lies are a lot like wishes. Often, what's said are things people desire to be true. A big body of research determines 3 significant reasons that people lie: to get something they want, so-called important reasons, to safeguard or promote themselves, and to hurt others. Avoiding punishment may be the main motivation for both children and adults. While everybody lies a little, it seems that only a little portion of people do the majority of the lying. There has been proof that prolific liars share the personality type of Machiavellianism. They are manipulative and exploitative of others. The characteristic is closely related to psychopathy. Is honesty always the best policy? Inclinations matter when it comes to behavior. It is often a choosing factor in the law, and there are times when lies can help others or shield them from harm. At times, lies are told to prevent tough conversations, like those involving critical feedback, and they may appear protective. However, they can ultimately downside the recipient by depriving him or her of helpful information that can promote positive change. Is deceptiveness always damaging? Professionals differ on this topic. Some really believe that even white lies, told with the aim of protecting others or smoothing social relationships, are damaging because they deny people the experience of reality that could be used to enhance their lives. Lies are harming to relationships because they block intimacy. Lies are considered damaging because they ruin trust, the bedrock of society, the belief that others are reputable and mean no harm. Is deceptiveness always wrong? Lies that purposely inflict harm are commonly considered unethical, but at times lying is done for good purposes. People might lie to secure others, so-called altruistic lies, such as when a health professional tells a family that their father died a tranquil death, when in fact he did not. Some lies are told to help people accomplish their goals, such as when a spouse tells a dieting partner that there are no sweets in the home. Many ethicists really believe that lies that are committed to benefit others should be viewed as warranted, and that a specific amount of deceptiveness may be necessary for preserving a healthy, functioning society. How are compulsive liars different? Pathological or compulsive liars tell lies about themselves and others for no noticeable purpose, and they lie even when their claims are obviously incorrect. In some cases, their behavior is an indicator of a personality disorder, such as psychopathy. Scientists really believe that such people might lie as a way of preserving control or to avoid disappointing others. Or their lies could be a type of wishful thinking. Has fake news always been an issue? Although the term fake news is reasonably recent, the dissemination of intentionally false information or disinformation to manipulate public attitudes is not new. Nazi propaganda spread anti-Semitic lies to further Hitler's goals of eradicating the Jews. The web makes it possible for the creation and spread of fake news, including doctored videos at high speed, and puts the burden of confirmation of info on the reader. Professionals advise people to generally work with skepticism, specifically at info that is surprising, and to always check the credibility of news sources. Chapter 4. Why virtual communication can leave you run down. More than ever, we're reaching out online and interacting practically. Remote communication is necessary to combating loneliness and emotions of seclusion. It's also the best means we have for linking and interacting during the COVID-19 pandemic. Though communicating that way can have drawbacks. If you are seeming like all those online calls and video conferences appear to be leaving you drained by the end of the day, it is not just you. Virtual tiredness is real. Below are 5 reasons you might be feeling worn out and tired by virtual communication. Social nonverbal communication. With Zoom or FaceTime, for example, you cannot depend on body language for communication in the same way you may when talking with somebody face to face. In some cases, there are sound delays, and it can get stressful in communicating or repeating yourself continuously. It can sometimes also be tough to pick up on inflections in tribes' voices, which can make it challenging to comprehend the fullness of what others are attempting to communicate. It also makes picking up on nuanced forms of communication, like sarcasm, harder to identify. Social boundaries. For individuals with social anxiety, Zoom or FaceTime make it harder to draw limits. Most people get to see into your environmental context, where you live or are staying. This is not just about physical surroundings. It's also more difficult to control interactions, especially if you happen to be remaining at home with others. For instance, an individual who works at a workplace likely has more power over their surroundings. Having said that, when working from home or socializing from home virtually, there is a higher chance that others, like a spouse or child, could drop in and disrupt accidentally or perhaps purposely. Social hints. Another reason all those online calls and discussions might be leaving you feeling tired and slow is because social hints end up being less clear. It can be hard to know when mingling should end and the work or primary purpose of the call should move. Certain social hints that are quickly read in reality, like dullness or frustration, can be harder to read practically. Simply because of this, it prevails for people to feel pressure to fill silences and reverse. Social transitions. Further intensifying the awkwardness of communicating remotely may be that you and the individual you are talking with are having a hard time to know when to shift from little talk into something more considerable. When it comes to linking virtually, a lot of people approach essentially being social with the assumption that the purpose of the call is to just talk and catch up. This can leave you feeling like you are having discussions online that do not appear to be going anywhere. In many cases, people are reaching out more regularly online for virtual interactions as a way of attending to feeling lonesome, not always because they really need to talk about a particular topic or problem. Social anxiety. Feeling worn out and drained by virtual interactions may also be in part to how you are hardwired. The benefits of digital hangouts are the flexibility and accessibility to connect with one another. Digital hangouts have less technical barriers to interacting socially. In other words, finding a place to meet, the cost of transportation. Nonetheless, it would be presumptuous to say that digital hangouts are correlated with a finite outcome of well-being. Anxiety and stress manifest in people in different ways, and while there are really common symptoms, the subjective experience can't be nicely confined. If digital hangouts are causing crippling social anxiety, maybe an alternative form of communication could serve better. If a person's anxiety is at a working level and the advantages of interacting socially exceed or cultivates positive conduct, then maybe a gentle push outside of the comfort zone can be handy. If this describes you or somebody you know, another technique is to shut off the video function if possible. Changing video settings is another useful technique to reducing online social anxiety, like decreasing lighting or changing filters to buffer image. There is no perfect formula for how you should connect with people or how typically you should connect. Everyone feels connection in a different way. For some people, texting is more than enough for them to feel socially engaged, while others may really need an audible and visual connection to be satisfied in their social life. Simply because people have transferred to digital hangouts does not mean your social limits have to change. In general, we really need to be proactive and creative in fostering virtual social connections throughout this time of seclusion. But we also really need to make sure that how we are interacting does not make things even worse. This is why understanding the social drivers that may be triggering you to struggle is essential now more than ever. Chapter 5: Nonverbal Communication and Strategic Versatility. Strategic flexibility means expanding your nonverbal communication repertoire to use the best skill readily available for a particular situation. Without using the strengths of both genders, and that includes consciousness of your own nonverbal communication skills and deficits, equal contribution in the home or in the work environment is unrealistic. I have realized that strategic flexibility is the primary characteristic of effective people, a crucial part of exceptional relationships at work and in the home. Most people who possess this capability are happier and more fulfilled. Standard wisdom tells us that our biggest strengths can also be our biggest weaknesses. This is particularly true when we fall back on knee-jerk reactions. This is a man's job, we think, or that is women's work. When Abraham Maslow mentioned that everything appears like a nail to a person whose only tool is a hammer, he may well have been talking about one-sided masculinity or overplayed femininity. The truth is, there's no single way to behave in the world. 3 models represent the types of intergender communication that each sex can employ. Increased sex identification. The man or woman displays and intensely protects his or her sex-typed nonverbal patterns. Gender reversal. The person moves powerfully in the direction of emulating the other gender's communication ideals. Inclusiveness. The strengths of both genders' traditional styles are appreciated, and large variations are enabled when fitting communication behavior to scenarios. I, for one, argue for the merits of inclusiveness. Learning how to comprehend women's communication styles does not make a man feminine, just as learning to understand a guy's style doesn't render a woman manly. Consisting of some reliable communication techniques of the opposite sex is no different than contributing to a person's technical vocabulary or appreciating another nation's customs. A woman may develop assertive skills and still be identified by her sensitivity. A man might develop interpersonal abilities and still be defined by his capability to exercise power. In Gendered Lives, Julia Wood shares a diary entry from Miguel that shows the concept of combining and valuing the full variety of human qualities. I like to be strong and stand up for myself and what I think, but I wouldn't want to be only that. I am also sensitive to other people and how they feel. There are times to be hard and times to be soft. By urging gender flexing, I'm not indicating that guys should become women and women become men. Paradise forbid. But they can learn from each other without abandoning effective qualities they already possess. Both men and women bring different nonverbal ability to the table. The more they can each expand their respective repertoires, the more effective they will be in relationships both at work and home. They have more choices and choices. Chapter 6. Tips to create powerful nonverbal communication. According to some studies, communication between people is more than 50% nonverbal. That being the case, we all should take a moment to ensure we aren't unintentionally sending out the wrong messages. 1. The eyes are the window to the soul. They display what your heart is feeling. Look deeply into your partner's eyes when you are having a discussion, whether the topic is easy or serious. 2. Pay close attention to your body position and posture. Leaning forward and facing your loved one automatically communicates receptiveness and interest. Turning away or staring off into space says you're not really there. 3. A mild capture of the hand or a touch of the arm while listening to your mate says that you're hearing him or her and that you understand. 4. Your face speaks volumes. A frown, a disapproving appearance, or rolling your eyes will communicate judgment. Do not let your face speak before you are prepared with the proper words. Notice how just a nod of your head can send a message of encouragement or, if done in a negative way, displeasure. 5. Stay away from diversions. If you aren't fully concentrated on whomever you are attempting to get in touch with, he or she will notice that you aren't entirely engaged in the discussion. This sends the message that you don't care. 6. Shaking hands can send out an effective message. For instance, the two-handed shake expresses deep sincerity. A high five programs mutual approval, and a sincere grip motivates trust. Keep from a limp or cupped handshake. It will make the other person question the connection. 7. Understand personal space. Physical distance is necessary. There are those that need as much as 3 feet between themselves and the individual they're speaking to. In intimate relationships, this distance could make somebody feel unloved. If you do not know what is comfortable for the other person, just ask. 8. Gestures can mean different things to different people. In some cultures, waving your hand can say, "Good to see you," and in others, the same movement can express something derogatory. Learn to be sensitive to how people whom you care about translate your movements. 9. Smells, clothes, and color choices all send out messages. Your perfume could be alluring, overwhelming, or offensive. It could also make the ones with more sensitive noses sneeze. Our clothes say we are cool, we're conservative, or we're unemployed. Pay attention to how others react to your personal style and make certain you're not sending unintentional messages. 10. If you actually want to get a great reading on how you look to others, video yourself talking. If you do not like something you see, you have the power to change it. Being mindful of your capability to communicate nonverbally can stop molehills from becoming mountains and can help you navigate the most difficult conversations. Chapter 8. How do I know when I am lying to myself? Human beings are masters of self-deception. We trick ourselves into believing things that are incorrect, and we refuse to really believe things that are true. Truth be told, we lie to ourselves about practically every little thing. From why we like wearing designer clothing instead of non-name brand style, to how our childhood affected our choice of romantic partners. And the majority of the time, we're completely unaware of the rampant lying going on in our own minds. The problem of self-deception. Given the unconscious nature of self-deception, being sincere presents us with a pretty serious issue. How do we know when we're lying to ourselves? As articulated in a question just recently positioned to Dr. Neil Burton in his blog, Can You Tell When You're Tricking Yourself?, lots of people are left wondering how to discover self-deception. How can you tell when you are lying to yourself? Plainly, you cannot directly ask yourself whether you are lying, because that would need you to tell the truth. So how do you know when you are deceiving yourself? In addition to the many questions positioned by Dr. Burton to help you on your journey to self-honesty, I offer some particular ideas taken from my new book, Lies We Tell Ourselves: The Psychology of Self-Deception. I use self-deception in the framework of romantic relationships as an example because it is widespread and has exceptionally destructive consequences. Spotting your self-deception. The most essential way to identify whether you are lying or not is to observe yourself, without judgment or evaluation. Just see and start asking questions that can expose your internal inspirations. As you do this, focus on 3 areas. 1. Notice your feeling. Typically, if we're mentally reactive to something or somebody, it is simply because we are being reminded of something painful, raw, or unsolved in our lives. In these areas, we're going to struggle to admit the truth. For example, if you deal with trust problems in your romantic relationships, you might feel anxious, angry, or scared when falling in love with a new mate. As this occurs, you might find yourself reactive to your mate in ways in which aren't actually necessitated or based upon who that individual is. As a matter of fact, your reaction is basically based upon who you are and unsolved concerns from your past that you're bringing into your new relationship. Given this reality, when you have a strong psychological reaction to something or a person, time out. Ask yourself, what is this emotion? What is my emotion in response to? Is my emotion really related to the present situation, or is the present situation activating something in me that's unsolved luggage from my past? 2. Notice your thoughts. All of us want to believe that our thoughts are accurate reflections of reality. Truth be told, the majority of us actually believe that we're right about everything. We think our thoughts hold true. Regrettably, our thoughts are usually incredibly inaccurate, typically in particular ways. Typically, our inaccurate thinking shows uncomfortable truths that we don't want to admit. When participating in a new romantic relationship, for example, people usually think things that are extremely irrational. These ideas can be really negative, like, I am certain my new partner is cheating on me because my ex cheated, and I am scared to fall in love because I'm going to get hurt. Or they can be extremely positive, like, This is the most incredible individual in the world. Given this reality, when you notice your thinking is severe or irrational, time out. Ask yourself, what words am I using to describe my partner? Are my thoughts accurate? Am I using my past to validate my existing thinking? How are my thoughts prejudiced? 3. Notice your behavior. We frantically want our conduct to be separate from our identity. We don't want to actually believe that the way we act reflects who we are. For example, you don't want to admit that you're envious even though you check your partner's phone messages. You do not want to have intimacy problems although you sabotage your relationships by breaking up with people when they get too close. Yet the truth is that our behavior is a reflection of who we are in some way. When your behavior isn't consistent with who you want to be or declare to be, pause. Ask yourself, why am I acting that way? What is inspiring my conduct? What do I not want to admit to myself about my conduct, and why? Choosing sincerity. We cannot be sincere with others till we initially are truthful with ourselves. When we deceive ourselves, we often burden and damage our romantic relationships. Being sincere needs intentional effort on a daily basis, and also tolerating some agonizing realizations. Yet by observing our feelings, ideas, and habits, we can find out about who we really are and give ourselves the opportunity to change. Chapter 9. How Women and Men Interpret Unmentioned Messages. Nonverbal communication is every little thing except the written and spoken word. Most people are always communicating. Even silence sends out a message to those around you. Morabian, a professor at University of California, Los Angeles, realized that when there were clashing verbal and nonverbal messages being sent, 55% of the message's meaning came from facial expressions and body movement. 38% originated from singing hints such as pitch, stops briefly, and tone, and only 7% of the message's meaning originated from the spoken word. This means over 90% of the meaning originates from nonverbal behaviors. Nonverbal communication includes body language, kinesics, singing hints, paralinguistics, the usage of space and distance, proxemics, touch, haptics, color, clothes, and artifacts. Nonverbal communication includes, but is not limited to, the following: touch, eye contact, gaze or glance, volume, pitch, volume of voice, use of personal space, gestures, facial expression, pauses, silence, articulation, speaking rate, dress and general appearance, posture, smell, non-fluencies or singing sounds, and, vocal fillers, whatever, yeah. Women and men tend to use nonverbal habits in a different way. For instance, women have a tendency to be more meaningful when interacting. They use more facial expressions and gestures than guys. Women smile more frequently than guys. Women smile so frequently that it can be hard to know when the smile has a meaning of joy, the circumstance really deserves a smile, or the smile means ashamed, angry, miserable, forgetful, etc. Men tend to smile only when they are really happy or have heard something amusing. Contrary to women, guys' smiles are generally congruent with their feeling of happiness. Just because guys don't smile as much as women and aren't as expressive in their gestures and facial expressions, Some view guys as emotionless or identify them as cold and disinterested. Women who don't smile and look straight at the speaker might be deemed upset, mad, unsupportive, or snobbish. Men who smile a lot, more than when they are very happy, and gaze at the speaker may be perceived as suspicious or a troublemaker. As the facilitator, relate the participants' remarks and examples to earlier chapters on socialization and how they have learned gender-appropriate nonverbal habits. Women are more experienced than men at figuring out nonverbal messages. The generalization that women are more intuitive than men may connect to women hearing the verbal and seeing the nonverbal messages. Women translate both message channels, verbal and nonverbal, when assigning meaning to the message as a whole. Men tend to concentrate on the words or content only of the messages they hear. Some of the thinking for this is that the ones with lower status usually need to be proficient at reading messages from each channel to ensure they get the full message. When an individual has low status, she or he wants to get as much info as possible from the high-status individual in order to react to them appropriately. In United States culture, people of high status, normally guys or white people, don't need to pay close attention to all message channels from a subordinate or lower-status individual. It suffices for them to hear the words as the sole message. The group that has the power doesn't really need to be competent at reading or decoding the nonverbal messages of the ones with less power. Nevertheless, for the ones with less power, nonverbal reading abilities increases their survival and ability to succeed. Women are more clued in than guys to individuals' nonverbal gestures and emotions, and women use those messages to analyze the message as a whole. This has been How to Analyze People, How to See Through Deception and Make Better Eye Contact. Written by Aries Helen. Narrated by Dean Collins. How to Analyze People, Verbal and Nonverbal Communication, Flirting, and Abuse. Written by Aries Helen. Narrated by Dean Collins. Chapter 1. The Body Language Myth. Is 93% of all communication really nonverbal? It's usually said that more than 93% of all communication is nonverbal. Given the effort we put into picking our words, for example, our verbal communication, can this figure truly be precise? Let's start by reviewing the history of this commonly quoted finding. Despite the fact that few know its origin, it originates from a study conducted by Mehrabian and Wiener in 1967. In their experiment, scientists read participants a list of words like dear, honey, truly, brute, and scram in a neutral, negative, or positive tone, and showed images of a range of matching or incongruent facial expressions. Judging by the sound of the words and feelings depicted in the images, they asked participants to determine the objective behind the words. They found that only 7% of the judgment was based on the real words, 38% was based upon tone, and 55% was based upon facial expressions, or, in other words, a total 93% nonverbal judgment. Given the method of this study, it is no wonder that participants mostly ignored the words, since they knew they were scripted, and instead paid close attention to paralinguistic hints. Does this suggest that nonverbal communication does not carry as much weight as a lot of us thought? The answer depends upon whether we perceive individuals' words to match their intentions. As research study co-author Albert Mehrabian later wrote, when there are inconsistencies between mindsets communicated verbally and posturally, the postural element ought to completely dominate in determining the overall mindset that is presumed. To put it simply, when somebody's words appear to match their nonverbal signals, we will likely fully pay attention to the words. It's only when we presume that someone's words do not match their nonverbal signals that we listen to nonverbal communication. So what can you do to be a much better communicator and keep away from misunderstandings? Create congruence between your verbal and nonverbal messages. If you are feeling miserable, be sure your facial expressions match. If you are happy, show it with your vocal tone and nonverbal communication. The more consistency you create, the more trust you will build, and the more your carefully chosen words will matter. Chapter 2. How to Identify a Flirt. Research finds that we're surprisingly bad at recognizing flirtation. "You've got stunning eyes. Can I purchase you a beverage?" This is just something that is typically said in a bar. Let's look into what's actually behind this. At times, flirting is entirely apparent, but typically it's more indirect and tentative. How properly can you decipher flirting from non-flirting? Are you very likely to misinterpret efforts just to be friendly as flirting? "He's always flirting with me." No, he is not. Or, are you the sort of person who thinks real efforts at flirtation are just basic conversation? "No one flirts with me. I'm attempting to flirt with you at this moment." That's sweet, but seriously, nobody flirts with me. Flirting is more complicated than you may think. By meaning, flirting is communicating in a way that signals attraction. Here's the thing, though. Many people aren't eager to experience direct rejection, so if they want to communicate interest, they might use indirect flirting methods, those that look like other non-flirting discussion: teasing, joking, or being friendly. Current research offers new insights into how precisely people detect real flirting conduct. The researchers brought complete strangers into the laboratory, had them speak with one another for 10 or so minutes in a impressions task, then asked them questions about the interaction. How do people properly analyze flirting and non-flirting? Physical attraction is part of the formula. The more physically drawn-in individuals are to complete strangers, the more they are apt to flirt, as you may expect. Being physically attracted to a person, however, has no relation to the perception of flirting. Simply because you think someone is adorable does not mean you'll automatically translate neutral remarks as flirtation. Men and women are both bad at detecting flirting. When talking with some stranger, research suggests most people actually don't know flirting when they see it. In this research study, women were only 18% accurate in recognizing guys flirting as flirting. The men did better, but with only a 36 precision rate, they still are running way below chance. Most of the time, flirts just aren't perceived as flirting. People recognize non-flirting more properly than flirting. In this study, women were 83% precise in seeing non-flirting as non-flirting, and men performed about the same at 84%. It seems both men and women are far better at acknowledging the absence of flirting than recognizing real flirting. The default, it appears, is to presume no romantic interest. In general, these are rather disappointing results. With so many people misinterpreting actual flirting for neutral discussion, a lot of people could be losing out on romantic passion. At the same time, though, people tend not to overestimate flirting, which could be socially useful. After all, the effects of misinterpreting casual chatter for flirtation could be very serious. We're still entrusted to the puzzle of how to precisely detect flirting, a puzzle that seems a lot more crucial now that we know how improperly people do at the job in general. Clues that help you identify real flirting. Search for nonverbal signals. Nonverbal communication can speak volumes. Research suggests that people observe certain behaviors that can communicate romantic interest. In certain contexts, smiling, leaning forward and touching a person, and making eye contact can suggest romantic interest. Listen for verbal flirting. Both males and females are equally good at recognizing certain verbal communications as flirting. Specifically, they translate sexual interest from compliments, obvious recommendations to being single, available to date somebody else, and using moderate sexual innuendos as signs of interest. Consider the context. Proof suggests that flirting is more apt to happen in spots that have the following features: sociability, people can quickly talk to one another; alcohol, the classic social lubricant; and common interest. It's a meeting place for like-minded individuals. Flirting styles predict flirting behavior. Not everybody flirts the exact same way, so if you know a person's style, you can use setting hints to help sort out if they're flirting. Recent research showed that traditional flirts, who have the tendency to be reclusive, are cautious and polite when flirting at a party, bar, or academic setting. They are not the folks talking it up at the grocery store. Physical flirts, who use a lot of body language, like to playfully flirt across many contexts. Lively flirts are less polite than physical flirts and have a tendency to be highly extroverted, tossing care to the wind when flirting. They aren't so sincere in their flirting when the setting doesn't match the objective, like supermarkets, but are genuine when speed dating. Finally, the genuine flirt and the polite flirt both choose to be introduced to somebody, rather than initiating contact themselves, and are cautious in their approach. Is there consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus? Making use of Kelly's 1967 attribution model, decoding a prospective love match, are we flirting with one another, can be helped by considering 3 functions of your interactions. Are your interactions constant across time? Do you appear to flirt every time you see each other? Is the individual's behavior to you distinct or special? Not how he or she acts towards everyone else. Finally, how to behave. If there's a general agreement that the majority of people connect with this person the way you do, your interactions are not as likely credited to mutual attraction. However, high consistency, high diversity, and low consensus may suggest that you two have a connection. Might there be love in the air? Chapter 3. Body Language Cues That Can Get You Into Trouble. Unlike spoken or written communication, nonverbal communication is not a true language. Specific nonverbal cues are typically open up to interpretation or misconception by others. So take care with these possibly dangerous body language hints. 1. Gaze. Be careful where you look. This seems obvious, but we are sometimes oblivious to where our eyes are focused. A female associate once pointed this out to me, saying, "The boss never ever looks me in the eye. He is always making eye-to-breast contact." 2. Touch. Don't touch me there. Touching another individual can suggest nearness and intimacy, or signal compassion or concern. In other words, a pat on the hand or shoulder. However, an innocent touch can also be misinterpreted by others or crossing the line sexually, or as a put-down or show of supremacy. Touch others with care and planning. 3. Yawning. Didn't you get enough sleep? This happened to me while talking with a coworker. I discharged a reduced yawn. In my defense, I hadn't been getting enough sleep, and her instant response was, "Am I tiring you?" My apology was uncomfortable. 4. Handshake. Limp and clammy. Your handshake is specifically essential in a job interview or when meeting new people. Handshake should be firm, but not too firm. A limp handshake can signify disinterest. Paired with sweaty palms, it can cause a really bad first impression. 5. Personal space. Stay out of my bubble. We all carry a bubble of personal space around us, a convenient zone that others should keep out of unless we provide approval to get in. Getting too near somebody can make them awkward and even angry. Get out of my space. 6. Smiling. Why are you smiling? Smiles are challenging and are typically open to analysis by others. A smile at the wrong time might be translated as mocking a person. Research also shows that guys often misinterpret women's innocent smiles as flirty. Again, when it comes to smiling, like a gaze, be aware of the nonverbal cues you send to others and the context. 7. Self-touching. Do not keep your hands to yourself. Rubbing or wringing your hands and other forms of self-touching can be analyzed by others as signs of discomfort or anxiousness. And take care about self-grooming. A well-known Seinfeld episode has Jerry scratching his nose as his girlfriend views him from the side. "No choice, no choice," Jerry shouts, when he realizes what it looked a lot like from her angle. 8. Gestures. What did you just say to me? Some gestures, like words, have meaning, such as giving someone the finger. Understand, however, that seemingly innocent gestures in one culture may have an absolutely different meaning in another culture. Our thumbs up or okay gestures might be obscene in another society and even constitute fighting words. Chapter 4. The many subtle ways women signal romantic interest. Guys are usually taught to make the first move, push for the first kiss, and start ever higher levels of sexual intimacy with a woman. This kind of pressure to make the first move can feel burdensome. However, research shows that it is women who usually signal whether a guy can make an approach in the first place, initiating the entire process. Drawing from work on mating interactions among non-humans, mostly birds, scientists in the 80s and 90s recorded early courtship conduct in a series of creative observational studies carried out in bars, dance clubs, and other spots where people meet. These researchers carefully tracked the nonverbal techniques used to signal sexual interest. They consistently noted that women indicated guys who intrigued them, helping to ensure their approach. What are the nonverbal habits that women engage in to signal their interest in a particular man? Here was a typical scenario. A woman walks into a bar with some of her good friends. She takes part in a long, constant scan around the room, ultimately repairing her look on a guy she finds attractive. Gaze is essential here, and an essential element of signaling interest. The woman keeps an extended gaze at the man until he notices her. She smiles, then she breaks the look, returns the look again, smiles, and again breaks the look. A woman intrigued by a guy then might primp or self-groom, fixing her hair a bit, adopting an open body posture, in other words, arms from the body, or starting to orient her body to face him. Once he approaches, as he usually does, both orient their bodies to one another, and the woman might take part in other nonverbal habits, like palming, displaying an open wrist and palm, self-touching, such as a breast graze, or uncovering her neck, maybe by leaning back or canting her head. Once you know to look for these habits, you can see them all the time. Two recently familiarized people who are sexually fascinated by one another will show increasing synchrony in their gestures and movements, light touching, particularly by men, smiling, leaning forward, and head tilting. Many women might even see belatedly that they find a person appealing by observing themselves self-grooming a little when an attractive man enters the room. Research on other societies finds similar habits. An eyebrow flash integrated with a smile was a typical signal in a range of cultural backgrounds, from the Balinese to Papuans, French, and Waikiki Indians. What's really intriguing, however, is that though most women could specify some element of this signaling process, men typically were unaware that they had in fact been indicated by the woman they approached, thinking instead that they simply had the initiative to approach an attractive woman. Trained observers have been able to anticipate to a startling high degree of accuracy the results of interactions between women and guys based upon women's nonverbal signaling behaviors alone. Just one of the best predictors of who would be approached was indicating frequency. High signaling women of average attractiveness were a lot more likely to be approached than low signaling, beautiful counterparts. Moreover, the rate of signaling on the part of women was highly correlated with how much interest they generated in the guys. Some men wrongly approached a woman who had not indicated them, but they were normally closed down quickly. Researchers specify these people as having poor decoding capabilities. Women have a similarly impressive selection of nonverbal shutdown behaviors, like leaning away, crossing their arms over their chest, keeping away from eye contact, and negative grooming behaviors, such as picking a person's teeth, the mirror opposite of signaling habits. Regrettably, guys typically were worse at picking up rejection signals, judging them to be weaker forms of communication than women meant them to be. These field studies typically used evolutionary concept as a conceptual framework, so the focus tended to be on males and females' courtship behaviors, though other researchers have found great resemblance between the behaviors used by women indicating their sexual interest in males and females signifying their sexual interest in other women. There is an absence of more up-to-date research on signaling and flirting more normally, yet flirting is necessary for conveying preliminary interest in a potential partner and keeping interest in a recognized relationship. Men tend to view flirting as more sexual and crucial than women do. Women tend to view flirting as more fun and relational. Existing applications in this line of research have become narrower, focusing to a great degree on eye look as a metric of sexual interest versus romantic love. Neurophysiological research has found that simple eye contact with an attractive person activates reward-related brain parts and prompts approach. Flirting and expressing interest in starting a relationship now rely heavily on written forms of communication in new digital technology environments. We may be spending ever-increasing hours meeting new people through our virtual worlds, but eventually we connect in person and count on our nonverbal habits to convey much more than words alone can do. Chapter 5. Flirting Techniques for Women. As it ends up, a few pioneering researchers have covertly watched women flirting in bars and in schools to answer these extremely interesting questions. Through their observations, they have found a number of nonverbal habits and body language hints that women use to indicate their potential interest to guys and motivate guys to approach them also. Nonverbal courtship patterns in women. The first study I reviewed came from Moore from 1985, who performed an observational study of women flirting in bars and on a college campus. Particularly, Moore had 2 trained observers covertly watch more than 200 single women in those locations for about 30 minutes each and record the women's nonverbal solicitation signals. Furthermore, the scientists described these solicitation signals as a motion of body parts or whole body that led to male attention, operationally described within 15 seconds following the behavior. Male attention was further described as a guy approaching the woman, talking with her, asking her to dance, and even, in a few instances, kissing her. From those observations, Moore identified 52 nonverbal behaviors that women use to signal their potential interest in a guy. Of those, some of the most regularly performed habits by women were: solitary dance. While seated or standing, the woman moved her body in time to music playing. Room-encompassing glance. The woman looked around the room for about 5 to 10 seconds without making eye contact with others. Brief darting glance. The woman gave a sideways 2 to 3 second glance at a guy of interest. Look fixate. The woman made eye contact with a guy of interest for more than 3 seconds. Head toss. The woman flipped her head backward and raised her face up briefly. Hair flip. The woman raised one hand up and then pushed it through her hair. Smile. The corners of the mouth were turned upward, at times showing teeth. Lean. The woman moved her upper body forward, closer to the man. Neck presentation. The woman tilted her head to one side, about 45 degrees, revealing the opposite side of her neck. Laugh or giggle. Generally, laughing or giggling was a reaction to a conversation with a guy. Head nod. Generally, in conversation with a guy, the woman nodded in contract. Beyond these flirting habits, once a man approached, women also touched in some ways to show interest also. Typically, they caressed a thing or the man's face, arm, leg, or back. Or the woman may position herself so her knee, thigh, or foot were touching the man to show interest. In some circumstances, a woman may even start a hug or hang off a guy. A follow-up research study by Moore and Butler in 1989 assessed some of these behaviors better. In this particular case, the researchers were interested in discovering which of these flirting and solicitation habits actually worked to get guys to method. The team again in bars, this time observing the distinctions in behavior between single women who were approached by a man versus women who didn't get approached. The results of their operations showed some considerable behavioral differences between women who were approached and those that were not. Especially, women who were approached usually smiled at guys, danced on their own, nodded at guys, leaned toward them, or slanted their head back, neck presentation, while women who didn't get approached performed none of those habits. Further, women who were approached were more likely to also look around the room, flip their hair, toss their head, and focus their glance on a specific man. Beyond those behavioral differences, Moore and Butler, from 1989, examined the general attractiveness of the women observed. On average, there was no difference in beauty between women who were approached and those that were not. Because of this, the guys approaching the women were a result of the women's behavioral distinctions, not their looks. Truth be told, according to the analysis, an unattractive woman who showed a lot of solicitation behaviors was more likely to be approached by guys than an attractive woman who did not display solicitation behaviors. The research studies here generally line up with previous research I have reviewed on flirting and body language. Considering that, the best way for a woman to signal her interest in a guy is to look at him and smile, while having actually open and relaxed body language. More particularly, in the research studies above, the women who were approached by men were having fun, dancing, smiling, and looking around. Simply put, they looked friendly and interested. If you are a woman and look for interest from a guy, start by looking interested in him. Catch his eye by taking a look around the room, dancing, moving closer, or flipping your hair. When you get his attention, look at him and smile. As he approaches, show that you're receptive by nodding or tilting your head. Once a guy approaches, flirting ends up being more about leaning in close, laughing, and touching. Actually, touching is very appealing and convincing. Even unintentional touching can lead to intimacy. So, caress your glass, find a reason to slide into the seat next to him, and get better familiarized. If you're a man wondering whether a woman is interested, search for the habits above. If a woman is looking around and flipping her hair, pay attention. If she makes eye contact and smiles at you, start the ball rolling and start a conversation. If she likes what you need to say and touches you, then it could be time to ask her out. Discovering these flirting habits helps both men and women learn more about one another better. If you are a woman, use them to send clear signals, and the men you like might be more likely to say hi. If you are a guy, try to find those flirting signals, and your own technique could be more likely to get a warm reception. Chapter 6. The New Communication Minimalism. Depression and suicide rates are rising sharply among young Americans. One aspect is social networks increasing anxiety, as users tire themselves in the dopamine rat race on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. It's an unregulated and boundless marketplace that puts them in a 24-hour competition for recognition with everybody else in the world, leading not only to FOMO, fear of missing out, but also a worry of not sufficing, a worry of not being a person. Youths are dealing with how to communicate, with experience overload, and perhaps most importantly, with needing to navigate a lot of possible identities. Self-promotion and personal branding are not the only pressure cookers on social media. The platforms are also significantly weaponized for asymmetrical information wars sustained by fake news, as the Philippines-based reporter and activist Maria Ressa underscored in a moving talk she gave at the DLD conference in Munich last week. A lie that is repeated 1,000,000 times ends up being a fact, she reminded the audience. On the exact same panel, MIT expert Sinan Errol added that it was half-truths in particular that contributed to spreading out virally because they involved just enough truth to get reliability and just enough made truths to be magnificent enough to provoke imagination. Aside from regulation, new metrics such as the idea of conversational health that Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey has been touting lately, or total abstinence, what might be other, more better ways of designing for and living a very good life on social media? A rejection to explain in words. One possible escape from the anxiety of social media is communication minimalism, a new trend both online and in the real world that strips communication to its essence, removes all intricacy and also the need for precision, and lowers it to something that we feel rather than we do. Communication that's being haptic or totally silent and that does not have to hold true, but rather feel true. From hieroglyphs to emoji, nonverbal means of communication have been used for centuries, but a new slate of product or services are now taking nonverbal to the extreme with a focus on fostering intimacy. In times of growing social seclusion, isolation, more than 3 in 5 Americans are lonely, and mental health problems, intimacy is both a scarce resource and a much-needed companion. Take silent book clubs, a phenomenon that began with 2 friends meeting in a San Francisco bar. They were sick of the assigned readings of standard book clubs and just wanted to read what they wanted. However, they didn't want to forfeit the company of others that comes with being a member of a book group. The format has since gotten traction, not just as a boon for introverts, but for everyone who appreciates silence as the great equalizer and a reliable driver of social intimacy amongst complete strangers. Silent book club members can bring any book they want, and they could go over the book with other guests or just read together in silent communion. There are now more than 100 active chapters around the globe, from Cape Town to Dubai to Stockholm. A touch without touching. When its social value exceeds its helpful function, scientists call a communication phatic. This phatic quality is exemplified by bond touch, a new product or service for 2 users, allowing them to communicate with one another simply by sending digital touches at any given moment via slick designer bracelets. Think of it as poking in the physical world with digital means. When one user sends a touch to the other's wristband vibrates and lights up. No words, just a light and a touch. Now, you could wonder, why not just send a text message? The answer is simple. Too complex. Too high of a real chance for miscommunication. Some declare bond touch as the hero of long-distance relationships, others as an extra physical digital bond for couples, parents and their kids, associates, friends, or complete strangers who see value in being physically reminded that the other person exists and considers them in that real moment. The service offers a touch history and even replays of past touches, and ultimately, according to the website, an encrypted and private space to share all memories with your one and only love. With this focus on exclusivity, Bond Touch is thus not just pleasing a desire for simpleness in our communications, but also for simplicity in our relationships. While some may find it weird, one can comprehend the item's appeal. There's something, touching about the idea of an extremely complicated world in which a simple remote touch can help us cultivate a relationship. Hearts without bodies. Eventually, we could not even need a digital pulse and may instead rely on our heartbeats as the cadence of human-to-human communications. Absolutely, nothing is more direct and nothing is more sincere. While our hearts might mislead us from time to time, they usually do not lie. Driven by this insight, the artist duo Diogo Teixeira and Diana Galjajevic created an installation called Heartbeat that invites two people to listen to one another's heartbeats in a quasi-private setting. Enhanced by highly sensitive microphones and witnessed by an attentive small audience, the installation develops an intuitive bond between two strangers by foregoing any rhetorical barriers. There is something reassuring in reducing human communication to the fundamental system of the physical body, but interestingly, experiences of intimacy do not have to include sex. Quite the opposite. In recent years, one could observe a desire to free relationships from the detailed layers of meaning and the power structures that come with it. Truth be told, the number of young Americans reporting to not have had sex in the former year has doubled to 23% between 2008 and 2018. The no-sex rate among young American men in particular has almost tripled at the time of that period. An escape from complexity. Maybe communication minimalism is the new celibacy. Heartbeats, bond touches, and silent book clubs provide an escape path from complexity and ambiguity. They allow us to feel more without the risk of being hurt, to touch each other emotionally without getting entangled. They all point to a new essentialism ensuring us that we can still manage the signals in the middle of all of the sound if we only lower the noise and focus solely on the signals. Communication is a true miracle and a minefield. With all of the nuances around political accuracy, the continuous chatter of social networks, and each and every single one of our words online recorded and possibly shared in broad daylight, it is no surprise that we end up being more reserved, keep back, or retreat entirely. Words are gifts, but also weapons. Using them can do harm and restrict the possibilities. Absolutely nothing said can be unsaid, and to remain a complete person, it could be better to keep most words for ourselves. Chapter 7. A Radical Idea for Boosting Verbal Abilities and Happiness. Would you like to enhance your relationships? Move ahead faster in your profession? How about doing a much better job preparing kids for their futures? One good way to do this is to sharpen your verbal abilities. Think about it. We are a social species who greatly depend upon one another for love, emotional support, physical well-being, income, and education, and almost every other thing that matters in life. And language has developed as a main means by which we reap the benefits of our social nature. It's through language that we comprehend those around us and reveal our ideas and needs. It is through language that we show others who we are and what we are capable of. It's through language that we bridge the gap between ourselves and those around us. So it needs to come as no surprise that communication problems are at the top of the list of reasons that couples look for counseling, or that poor verbal skills stop otherwise gifted employees from advancing, or that college entrance tests heavily emphasize verbal capability. But let's face it, taking writing classes, public speaking classes, or improving reading comprehension takes work, a ton of it. Who has time for that? Wouldn't it be great if there were a basic, fun way to turn out to be better communicators just through daily living? Well, new research on the relationship between character and verbal ability suggests that there is. You may be able to improve your verbal abilities just by opening yourself up to new experiences. William Revell and co-workers at Northwestern University discovered that the Big Five personality trait of openness favorably associated with multiple steps of verbal capability. The characteristic of openness makes up a desire for new experiences and ideas, along with a gratitude of art, poetry, and abstract thinking. Personality researcher Colin DeYoung, who also found a correlation between verbal skills and openness, suggested that people who are open to new experiences learn and retain info better, giving them an edge in communication ability. This does not guarantee that opening yourself up to going to new spots, meeting new people, reading unfamiliar authors, or going for nature walks will make you a much better communicator. However, it stands to reason that expanding your aperture on the world will increase the breadth and depth of your knowledge and give you more fascinating things to communicate. So here's a question. How do you accumulate both in openness and verbal skill? Do these qualities associate in you? And how do you stack up with other readers of this blog? Constantly pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone does for your brain what weightlifting does for your muscles. It grows and sustains healthy tissue. So the next time your partner suggests that you go to a film that you don't want to see, go to a relative you do not want to go to, or holiday in a place that you don't want to holiday, open yourself up to the experience and say yes. You might not be happy with the outcome, but your brain will be. Chapter 8. Nonverbal Communication Across Cultures. Next time you are having a discussion with someone, notice how much of the content is communicated without words. Let's say your boss calls you to her office, hands you your examination report, and says, "I am speechless." Since the report is in a firmly sealed envelope and your boss is temporarily robbed of speech, you're going to search for nonverbal clues from her face, gestures, posture, intonation about your fate. Did she exclaim those words with a happy smile while extending her arm for a handshake? Or did she whisper them through pursed lips with a deep frown dividing her eyebrows? In any case, the picture painted by your boss's nonverbal cues will probably communicate more information to you in that immediate moment than her words. In an intercultural context, when our interlocutors don't share our linguistic and cultural backgrounds, nonverbal communication takes on a particularly poignant role. It can make the distinction between appearing genuine and being misconstrued. It can bring people together or pull them apart. It can help us speak and read volumes without comprehending a word of each other's languages. Psychologist David Matsumoto is a well-known expert on nonverbal conduct, culture, and emotion. Here he is, in his own words, on the weighty repercussions of nonverbal communication across cultures. 1. What role does nonverbal conduct play in cross-cultural communication? To comprehend this, we really need to understand the role of nonverbal conduct in any communication. Just as we're talking now, you are nodding and smiling, and I'm getting a signal that you are following what I am saying, maybe even agreeing with me. That is an example of back-channel communication, and it greases the wheels of any sort of communication. Plainly, words are extremely essential simply because they communicate a particular content. However, nonverbal behavior also communicates content, and far more. The function of all communication is to share inclinations, and nonverbal conduct plays a role in that as well. It helps us to share our emotions, arrangements, and disagreements, hence helping us to communicate our intents together with verbal language. 2. What are some common obstacles of nonverbal communication across cultures? Consider the people you know who are proficient in languages but do not get along well with others from different cultures. Part of the reason is that verbal language by itself only communicates a specific amount of content. An individual who only develops their language skills without the nonverbal habits that are connected with that language doesn't discover well. People can be saying the content they want to communicate, but just not relate properly because a lot of what's being communicated is nonverbal. This can result in intercultural dispute, misunderstandings, and ambiguities in communication, regardless of language fluency. Yet nonverbal behavior can also grease communication when there's a lack of language fluency. I am certain anybody who is interculturally competent can go to any country where they don't speak the language and still be able to interact well with others. Information shows that language classes that incorporate nonverbal communication and civilization in their curricula fare better than standard language classes that focus on the language only. 3. What advice would you have for becoming more efficient when interacting nonverbally with people from different cultures? I have 3 tips. 1. You should try to be enjoyable. Many people like pleasant people, and a basic smile goes a long way. 2. Be interested. Show interest in others, languages, and cultural artifacts. Ask questions. Then intercultural interaction doesn't end up being a hassle. It ends up being an experience. 3. Just try to learn something crucial about the language and civilization of your interlocutor. An example could be this. Learn and try some easy phrases. Good morning, please, and thank you go a long way to greasing many interactions. A lot of people will then feel like they want to help you out, which can help you get over any sort of communication problems. Plus, you'll grow as you connect. 4. Which emotion is simplest to communicate across civilizations, and which one is most vulnerable to misconceptions? Most convenient one to communicate is joy. Being nice and enjoyable is easy to communicate. It's free and has most impact. All other feelings are susceptible to misunderstanding. One could be frustrated, disgusted, sad, stunned, afraid, or concerned, and all of these feelings can be misinterpreted somehow. But positivity isn't normally misinterpreted. Importantly, one has to also think about how one regulates their emotions and expressions in various interactions, simply because what they may bring about a feeling in one could not be what's actually going on in the other. It's true for interpersonal interactions, ask any newlywed, and intercultural communication. 5. What are some advantages of being proficient at nonverbal communication? In the setting of intercultural communication, I think the primary benefit is that if you are good at nonverbal communication, then you can go wherever without knowing the language and you'll get along. It's easier to have efficient intercultural interactions, even without knowing the language, when you are skilled in nonverbal communication. As a species, we have been counting on our nonverbal channels to send and receive messages for significantly longer than the evolution of our languages. Even though our civilizations commit us to different ways of expressing ourselves without words, we are much more comparable than we may think. As Dr. Matsumoto mentions, the clinical data on most all mental procedures, attributes, and behaviors shows that the cultural differences among us are much smaller than our individual differences. Despite our propensity to lose focus of our similarities and instead to highlight our differences, many people in the world want to get along, says Matsumoto. As with all relationships, communication is crucial. That's when our nonverbal abilities can help us to better connect to other members of our human family, even when words fail us. Chapter 9. What is the importance of nonverbal communications? I was just recently asked during an interview about the relative importance of nonverbal communication in our daily lives, and I replied that I couldn't think of a moment when nonverbals were trivial. When pushed to offer 3 examples of when nonverbal communication was particularly crucial, I suggested the following 3. Arguing that these were also, in my viewpoint, the most important things we do as humans, and so it is not a surprise we do these 3 things nonverbally. Mate selection. We want to believe that we are above such insignificant things as how an individual looks, how tall they are, the color of their hair, how they smell, how they feel, what the tone of their voice is like, how they walk, how they dance, how their eyes look at us, and even the color of those small pupils. And yet all the research shows that we pick our mates on those very essential messages that we receive and interpret nonverbally. Courtship decisions, after all, aren't based upon a written exam or a resume. Those choices are influenced by nonverbals that we pick up through our senses at a conscious and subconscious level. Are we then not attracted by words? Of course, words can be seductive. Poetry, for instance, just as intellect can be appealing. But in the end, in every culture studied where individuals have a choice and do not count on arranged marriages, it is the nonverbals that are primarily accountable for who we end up with, and that is no small matter. Child rearing. Infants enter the world not able to speak. Through every little thing from squirming in their diapers to making cooing noises and to smiling and frowning, babies telegraph their needs, wants, and desires, and also when they're distressed or awkward. It's through nonverbals that we communicate love as parents, and through touch we bond reciprocally with a child. No amount of words can compensate for a hug, a smile, or a soft caress. It's through nonverbals that we learn if a child is sick, has a fever, or has seeing, hearing, or even neurological issues. If not for nonverbal communication, how would an infant know if it's loved and invited? But it doesn't end there. When that child participates in the first day of school, it is their nonverbals at the end of the day that attest to how every little thing went, even before they say a word. Evaluating risk. Imagine trusting everybody who comes to your front door wanting to come in just based on their words. Have you ever looked behind you while at an ATM to see who might be standing too close? We live in a world where predators are no longer of the 4-legged variety, and yet we still freeze in place when we see a snarling pet dog, as our forefathers froze when they saw a lioness. We still examine for threat non-verbally, just because it is critical to our survival, as Gavin de Becker wrote in The Gift of Fear. That is the reason that during the night, as we get into our cars, we look to see if a person is tracking our movements or getting too close. We do not ask strangers if they will hurt us. We evaluate them non-verbally to determine their intent and dependability. These were but 3 examples, and there are many more. And so to the question, to what degree do non-verbal communication means matter, I would answer that non-verbal ways to communicate are the not without for social relationships, maybe even for our survival. Chapter 10. Typical Forms of Verbal Abuse in Relationships. If we look at verbal abuse as a method of preserving control and power over someone, we can think of the kinds of verbal abuse listed and explained in this book as being ways that someone tries to completely dominate or control their partner. Does this mean that the abuser actually feels more effective when he or she, for example, discreetly puts down his partner's interest? Yes, as incomprehensible as this is to some of us. Does this mean that their partner feels put down? Not always. He or she might feel a twinge of sadness because they can't share this interest. Or she or he could feel a twinge of sadness that their partner cannot enjoy, say, a certain artist or composer. Does this mean that the abuser cannot or does not enjoy this pleasure? Not always. She or he may simply find greater satisfaction in feeling that they have power over their partner. We will also see that verbal abuse prevents real relationships. That appears apparent, but the partner of an abuser could live under the illusion that he or she has a real relationship. That could be for some reasons. An essential one is that, as a couple, the abuser and their partner could function sufficiently in their particular roles. Verbal abusers generally experience many of their feelings as anger. An example would be the following. If a spoken abuser feels not sure and anxious, he may simply feel angry, possibly angry that he is feeling not sure and anxious. Yet part of being human is the capability to feel. The ability to feel, like the ability to think, is universal to humankind. Sadly, the abuser is normally unwilling to accept his emotions and reluctant to reveal them to a partner. He builds a wall between himself and his partner and preserves that distance. In the verbally violent relationship, Patricia Evans determines certain categories of verbal abuse. Some are clear, while others are more subtle. 1. Withholding. Withholding is mainly manifested as a withholding of info and a failure to share ideas and emotions. A person who keeps info refuses to engage with his or her partner in a healthy relationship. She or he doesn't share emotions or thoughts. When she or he does share anything, it is simply accurate or functioning information of the sort their partner could have looked up online, continue reading his or her Facebook wall, or figured out on their own. Examples of withholding communication that struggle to engage the partner include: the automobile is practically out of gas, the keys are on the table, and the show is on now. 2. Countering. Countering is a tendency to be argumentative, not merely in political, philosophical, or clinical context, but in normal context also. The victim of the abuse could share her positive feelings about a motion picture she just saw, and the abuser may then attempt to convince her that her emotions are wrong. This is countering or dismissing the victim's emotions, thoughts, and experiences regularly. 3. Discounting. Discounting is an effort to deny that the victim of the abuse has any right to his or her thoughts or emotions. It may come out as criticism, but criticism of a certain kind. The abuser might tell the victim regularly that he or she is too sensitive, too childish, has no funny bone, or tends to make a huge deal out of nothing. The abuser consequently denies the victim's inner reality, indirectly telling a partner that how they feel and what they experience is wrong. 4. Verbal abuse disguised as jokes. The abuser could say something very upsetting to the victim of the abuse and, after seeing her reaction, add, "It was just a joke." Abuse isn't okay in any form. Jokes that hurt are abusive. 5. Obstructing and diverting. Obstructing and diverting is a kind of withholding in which the abuser decides which subjects are good discussion subjects. An abuser practicing this form of abuse could tell the victim that she's talking out of turn or is complaining too much. 6. Accusing and blaming. In these forms of abuse, the abuser will implicate the victim of things that are outside of his or her control. She or he may implicate a partner of stopping them from getting a promotion because the partner is overweight, or destroying his or her reputation because the partner quit college. 7. Judging and criticizing. Judging and criticizing is similar to implicating and blaming, but also involves an unfavorable examination of the partner. As Evans mentions, most "you" declarations are judgmental, critical, and violent. Some abusive judging and criticizing "you" statements are, "You are never ever satisfied," "You always find something to be upset about," and "Nobody likes you because you are so negative." 8. Trivializing. Trivializing is a form of verbal abuse that makes most things the victim of the abuse does or wants to do seem irrelevant. The abuser may undermine his or her work, style of dress, or choice of food. 9. Undermining. Weakening is similar to trivializing, which includes weakening every little thing the victim says or suggests, or making her question herself and her own viewpoints and interests. 10. Threatening. Threatening is a common form of verbal abuse and can be extremely explicit, such as, "If you don't begin doing what I say, I will leave you." Or it can be more subtle, such as, "If you do not follow my advice, others will find out that you are a really unreliable individual." 11. Name-calling. Name-calling can be explicit or subtle. Explicit name-calling can consist in calling the victim of the abuse a bitch or other painful words. But it can also be more subtle, like when somebody says things that are implicitly upsetting. For instance, "You are such a victim," or "You think you are so valuable, don't you?" 12. Forgetting. The classification of forgetting covers a variety of issues ranging from forgetting a guarantee to forgetting a date or a visit. Even if the abuser truly forgot, it is still abuse, just because he ought to have made an effort to remember. 13. Ordering. Any form of ordering or demanding is a kind of verbal abuse. It falls under the general issue of control. 14. Denial. Denial is abusive when it includes denying someone's bad behavior and failing to understand the repercussions of this behavior. An abuser will always try to find a way to validate and justify his conduct. This is a way of denying that he has done anything wrong. 15. Abusive anger. Any form of shouting and shrieking, particularly out of context. Even yelling, "Shut up," is violent. No one really deserves to be chewed out. This has been How to Analyze People: Verbal and Nonverbal Communication, Flirting, and Abuse. Written by Aries Helen. Narrated by Dean Collins.